car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis Wright.
Welcome into the Attorneys. I'm Art Franklin as we dive into another issue that matters to you, of course, then it matters to us. On this show, we're talking about why it's so important to have underinsured motorist coverage, and that's what we're going to deal with as we get over to Hollis Wright's managing partner, Josh Wright, and good to have John back.
Oh my gosh, John's great. He's a superstar, not only at our law firm, but he could be doing this show, and ultimately he will be doing this show. But you know, John and I do a lot of this uninsured and underinsured motorist work. And there are a lot of issues I think the general viewing public doesn't really understand related to how this concept of UIM works and how important it is in Alabama. 25% of drivers in our state right now do not have insurance. And so everyone's supposed to have insurance, but 25% do not. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and why it's important to have uninsured motorists or underinsured motorist coverage. But first, John, thanks for being back on. Does a great job at the firm, one of my partners, and you're an expert in this area.
Yeah, it's something that we deal with, every day. Thank you all for having me back on. I appreciate it. I'm glad to come on and talk with you all and talk with everybody out there about this topic. Like I said, it's kind of an integral part of what we do, handling, auto accidents, trucking accidents. And so I guess initially it'd be a good idea to get an understanding of what uninsured motorist coverage is. It is a rainy day coverage. It's there if, like Josh was saying, 25% of drivers in Alabama don't have insurance. So uninsured motorist coverage is there. It's actually coverage you purchase with your auto policy, and it's there to kick in if the other driver that causes the accident doesn't have any insurance whatsoever. So that's uninsured, and they get lumped together with underinsured, and that is a secondary coverage if the person who causes the accident, for instance, doesn't have enough coverage. They do have liability coverage, but say they only have the state minimum, which in Alabama is $25,000 in coverage. As you can imagine, one trip to the emergency room can be well in excess of $25,000 just in medical bills alone. That's not talking about pain and suffering and permanent injury and all the other things that go into a personal injury claim. So you've got the uninsured motorist on the one hand, the underinsured motorist on the other, that's there if the person who causes the accident doesn't have enough insurance.
And let me mention this because I think it's important. We have cases all the time. I have a case going right now that involves a trucking company who leased a trailer, and the trucking company and the trailer were working for a wholesaler of logs and then ultimately a supplier of logs, right? So there are multiple chains involved in this, and because a couple of the lower ends on the chain thought they were being indemnified from above, they did not secure coverage for this trailer and this load. Even though they had coverage for their tractors, they didn't secure it for this event, so it was excluded. So sometimes what you see, Art, is not just someone doing it the wrong way and saying, well, I know the law requires me to have liability insurance and at-fault insurance. I'm just not going to pay for that. Sometimes it is a technicality based on a corporate structure or a business relationship or something going on related to a chain of command, if you will, in an operation. And so we see that a lot where someone's completely uninsured. One of the things I was going to ask you that I think is important that people ask about all the time is, I don't want to go through my own carrier to ding my own carrier for my uninsured motorist coverage because I don't want it to impact my premiums when I get renewed. Can you talk about that just a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we run into all the time. It sounds very counterintuitive. I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I making a claim against my insurance? And like you said, the kind of the knee jerk is my premiums are going to go up. You got to remember that in Alabama, we do have contributory negligence. So this coverage is only going to come into play if you did nothing wrong. Okay, so that's square one. And insurance companies they're all about adjusting risk, okay? And if they're paying out on an underinsured or uninsured motorist claim, it's because you did nothing wrong. You're not a riskier driver. You were just wrong place at the wrong time and you were injured. And so the insurance company should not raise your rates if you make a claim for uninsured or underinsured motorists. Same if you don't cause an accident, you make a property damage claim. And so the knee-jerk and kind of the initial conversation is, well, I don't want to do that. Sometimes you don't have an option if the other driver didn't have any insurance. And a lot of times the other driver's insurance limits are insufficient to make you whole. And so to get made whole, you have to make that additional claim and access that additional coverage.
You guys both mentioned the 25%. I want to go back to that because I was really struck by the fact that 25% of the motorists are not covered or don't have uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage. When you consider the consequences of that, because those consequences are severe, aren't they?
They absolutely are. I mean, we're dealing with people who can be, a lot of times are catastrophically injured, and you got people driving around that just aren't doing it right, as Josh alluded to earlier. And so, yeah, it's important to have this coverage. If you don't have it, I guess the one takeaway that I would say from the show today is look at your declarations page, talk to your insurance agent, and find out, do you have this coverage? Because the consequences can be severe, and most times this is a fairly inexpensive coverage. So the liability portion of your insurance, that's going to be make up the main chunk of your premiums. The rental car reimbursement and underinsured motorist is something that's a secondary coverage like we talked about. So, I mean, we're talking $10, $15, $20 maybe during a policy premium is how much it's going to go up for you to have $25,000 or $50,000 in coverage if you need it.
And we oftentimes, because we deal with this every day, this type of coverage, we just jump into this topic of uninsured motors just to maybe add a little context to someone that's watching. Typically when you have, and John's done a really good job with this already on the show, but just to add a little more, typically when someone goes to an insurance agent or they say, hey, look, I've got to have insurance because I'm operating my vehicle, and the person or the entity who has financed my car is requiring me to have insurance. Okay, so that's property or comprehensive coverage. Then the state dictates that we all have at-fault coverage, or what we call liability coverage. If you cause an accident, that individual you injured is going to be protected. In addition to that, there are rental coverages. There are all sorts of add-ons that you can have. This uninsured or underinsured coverage is a separate line item. And the interesting thing about this line item, unlike the other coverages, is you are presumed to have this coverage in your policy unless you elect not to have the coverage. You have to waive the coverage. So it is a voluntary decision that you decide you don't want uninsured motorist coverage. As John mentioned, did a really good job. Reality is it's the cheapest of all of the coverages out there, and it is the most important coverage you can have for you and your family to the extent that there is an injury. I know we're getting ready to go to break, but let me tell you this, and this is important. When we come back, what I want John to talk about a little bit about how this impacts and protects not just the person involved in the accident, but what happens if your kid or your wife or your husband are injured in an accident? Does the coverage in your household apply to them? That's what I want to talk about, because that's really important.
John, you see how good he is at setting up these teases, right? He got you on your edge of your seat right now as we're talking about this topic. We also want to remind you, we want to do this very early on, that there are lawyers, attorneys at Hollis Wright right now standing by. I mean standing by, phone in hand. If you call this number, 1-844-LAW-TALK, you will reach an attorney from Hollis Wright. They will answer your call, your question, and it's a free call and it's confidential. All you have to do is make it. We got more to talk about. Stay with us. The Attorneys continues after this.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
When someone drives drunk and they injure another, there are firms in Alabama ready to make sure they never do it again. Our attorneys are standing by right now to give you a free consultation. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. Want to remind you again to make sure you get in contact with Hollis Wright at 1-844-LAW-TALK for a free confidential call. Josh, you laid up a pretty good tease there before we left, but you got something even better.
I have better than the tease
Yes.
right now, because we are lucky enough to be joined by John's daughter, who happened to decide and come and be part of our studio audience today to watch her dad go through this. We have this thing at the firm that John is well aware of. We call it family first, firm second, and that has always been our motto, that family transcends and is greater than the firm. And that is what I think gives the firm a great chemistry with the lawyers we have. And so I know that we've got a rising second grader with us right now that's going to be able to explain to her teacher what she did this summer. But John, I'll let you introduce.
This is my beautiful and wonderful daughter, Emmy. She is going into second grade next year, and she wanted to tag along today. She loves it when she sees Josh on the TV in the morning on commercials, or Carter, and always likes to run in the room and let me know. So I said, well, hey, we're going to be filming The Attorneys. You want to come and check it out? And she did. So you happy to be here? Yeah.
We love having you here.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Love having you here.
She's absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful young lady.
All right.
Yes.
Love it. Well, thank you for being on with us. We appreciate it. Hey, and you know what? This is a good intro into our concept, which is that our uninsured motorist coverage does not just apply to the individual that gets the coverage. Uninsured motorist coverage also applies to our family members that may be involved in an accident with another adult, for example, if it was Emmy.
That's right. So you've got your, the coverage of the vehicle that you're in, but you can also access any at-home policy. So, for instance, say I was, in the car with Josh and we got into an accident. I would have access to the underinsured motorist coverage that Josh has on his car, and then also would be able to access the policies that I have on my vehicles, even though I wasn't in them. And the same thing goes for, for my wife, for my children. God forbid they're ever in an accident and they're passengers in a vehicle, they can access, those coverages. And also, God forbid I'm driving and cause or involved in an accident, not if I cause an accident, but if I'm involved in an accident that I did not cause, then I'd be able to access that policy, and my family members or the passengers in my vehicle would be able to access those as well. And so these coverages are written, and it might be a good idea to kind of explain a little bit, because we hear 25,000 is a state minimum. So it's the way these are written it's a per person and a per occurrence limit. So the state minimum is a $25,000 per person and $50,000 per occurrence. So say all three of us are involved in an accident, we're all in the car together. Any one person could recover up to $25,000. The most that is saying we had a 25/50 policy, any one person could recover up to 25. The maximum that they would pay, or they would be contracted to pay, would be $50,000. We'll set aside any bad faith issues or anything like that. But generally, that's the general framework on how it works when you've got multiple people. Because unfortunately, and especially with the summer and everything, you're driving around, you've got multiple people in the car, and so these things you can get to that 50,000 or that per occurrence limit pretty quickly.
It's another good example, Art, of why it's important to have a lawyer involved in these cases, because a lot of people will resolve a case with an insurance company without a lawyer and not even realize that they have waived their uninsured motorist coverage because of the way they handled it, or they may not have waived it, but they didn't even know they had uninsured motorist coverage that was applicable that could have added another $100,000 to $200,000 onto the value of their claim based on their injury. And so having a lawyer involved is going to be able to make sure that you have access to all of those different policies.
It just makes me think about, is the agent considering those things when you start talking to an agent about your insurance, your type of coverage? Because right now everyone should be running out, looking at their policy, hey, going through all those 100 pages of that policy to find out if this policy, if they have this coverage.
Absolutely, and to your point, Art, about the insurance agent or whoever is selling it, a lot of times, and I think Josh kind of alluded to this in the first segment, this is a coverage that the Alabama legislature said that must be provided, that you have to go in as the insured and sign a rejection. And I know I've handled cases, and I'm currently handling one, where the insurance company could not produce that signed rejection. And so it defaults to there being the state minimum of coverage. And had my clients not contacted an attorney, they wouldn't have known to ask that next question, because we get a letter saying there is no coverage. Well, my next question is, well, prove it, okay? Yeah. I can't take your word for it. Show me the signed rejection, and then it's a non-issue. Well, that leads to, well, we don't have it, and we had all these vehicles that were insured, and we were paying. So, it's important to get, especially when you're dealing with this type of, uninsured motorists, and we do it every day, so it's kind of second nature, but there's a certain procedure you have to walk through. And if you don't do it correctly, you can void the coverage, or if you don't ask the question, you might not be able to access the coverage. So
unwrap this, and let's add some context to it. When you settle a case with the at-fault carrier, there are certain responsibilities you have if you want to access your uninsured motorist or underinsured motorist coverage. Explain how you have to access those coverages, what you do as a lawyer to make sure that you don't waive those coverages for people. And I know we're trying to put it in layman terms, so it's just as simple as we can make it.
Yeah, you've got to remember that you've got a contract with your insurance company, okay? So there's certain duties that you in signing that contract, that you've got to cooperate with them, you've got to give them notice of a potential claim, and then the Alabama common law has kind of created a framework that we have to work through. So before I even get the offer from the tortfeasor, from the person who caused the accident, I'm putting my own client's carrier on notice. And then once there's an offer on the table that exceeds or is at the policy limits for the other driver, I'm letting the underinsured motorist carrier or underinsured motorist in that situation know about it, so they can go through it and vet everything, and they have certain decisions that they can make. But it's making sure that they're brought in at the right time and that they have sufficient information so that they can make their decision and so we can move forward and not void that coverage.
And I know we're about to go to break, but let me just give you this little story that's kind of funny. I ask all the time, and I know our lawyers, including our younger partners and some of our associates, always laugh at me when I send this email, but I'm like, hey, have there been changes in the uninsured motorist law? Because I feel like the law changes all the time, or there's a nuance or some case impacted some, so I'm always sending emails. Another good thing you can do,
What's that?
If you scan the QR code, you get added to our MailChimp,
Right.
and if there are changes in uninsured motorists, we're probably going to write about it, and then you'll know about it. So there's another reason why. Scan the QR code. How about that?
Because we give you useful information,
That's
good resources. If you scan that QR code, it's on your screen right now, and it will put you on our email list. Also, want to remind you, you can still reach an attorney at Hollis Wright, 1-844-LAW-TALK. It's a free call. It's confidential. We're going to get right back into this. We got a little bit more time to finish this topic when we come back. Stay with us.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
You see us each Sunday night on The Attorneys, but remember, our attorneys are here all week long to help you with your personal injury claim.
Our attorneys are standing by right now to give you a free consultation at Hollis Wright. Your result matters.
Welcome back. You're watching The Attorneys as we continue the discussion on uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. And John Spade is here joining us. And John, I want to jump right back into this because I know we got a little bit of time left. I want to ask you this. How much uninsured motorist coverage can be used per accident?
Well, so the general rule from the common law is that you can access up to 3 vehicles on any one policy. And so the amount of coverage is going to be dictated by how much coverage you purchase. So if you have 25, then you can stack up to 3 vehicles. You can access $75,000 per person. If you were to have, say a 100, 300 on those vehicles, then you could have $300,000 in coverage. And so the law has said that in Alabama you can stack up to 3 coverages on any one policy. Now there are some insurance companies out there that write a separate policy for every single vehicle. So if you had 4, 5, or 6, 8 vehicles, and each vehicle has its own policy, then you can access every single one of them. So you could access, if you had 100 on each, then you have $800,000 in coverage. And also, if you've got other vehicles that are in your home, say you've got a kid that's got, a Geico policy and you've got USAA or State Farm or whatever, you can access those policies too. So you can, there's different ways you can maneuver it. And I think that's why it is important. A lot of people, well, I got in a car wreck and it's straightforward and I'm not, all that hurt or the insurance company's going to take care of me. You've got to go through a lot of different things and procedures and know how these things play together and the timing of when to let certain carriers know about things. So that's why it's important to get an attorney involved.
Yeah. And, let me tell you where this comes up a lot. Someone has an accident. They say, I want to do it alone with my insurance company. I'm not going to hire a lawyer. And then they end up with a herniated disc and they end up with surgery and they go to the hospital and their insurance company pays, or maybe they don't have insurance and the hospital puts a lien on them, and all of a sudden they owe $45,000, $50,000 in medical bills, and there's only $25,000 of coverage for the person that causes the accident. And all of a sudden, they look at it and they say, oh my gosh, I'm completely upside down. I owe more than the coverage available. Well, if you didn't get a lawyer involved, you may not know that you have the ability to access, upwards of 3 policies or 1 policy with 3 separate coverages, but additional coverages, as John mentioned, if they individually write the policies, to where you could have hundreds of thousands of dollars of uninsured motorist coverage that protects you in that circumstance when you're upside down. And Art, I will promise you this, the number of people that I see that are upside down where they owe more to a health provider than coverage out there would shock you. It happens so often. And so people need to protect themselves by hiring lawyers and getting them involved early to try and make sure that they maximize all the potential coverages that are out there. And John's been talking about some great ways to do it and how he investigates these claims.
Yeah, and you had something else you wanted to go to as well.
I want to talk just a little bit about, like, when do you recommend you should put your carrier on notice that's your own carrier, because people are like, I don't want to tell my carrier because then it's going to cost me money. You need to put your carrier on notice pretty quickly, don't you?
Yeah, certainly you need to reach out to an attorney pretty quickly for the reasons that we've discussed and that we always bring up on these shows. I would say that like going back to what we talked about in the second segment, of there's a duty to cooperate, and they have to be informed, some level, so they can make their decisions on how they want to proceed, they being the insurance company. We want, if the case is a severe catastrophic injury where there's just no way that there's ever going to be enough coverage, then we're going to put the uninsured or underinsured motorist carrier on notice immediately. Once we get a sense of what the limits might be for the other driver, that's when we're going to go and put the uninsured, underinsured motorist carrier on notice. Whenever I'm talking to a potential new client or a new client, I like to have for them to walk away with this kind of 30,000-foot view that we've been talking about today on how the procedure generally plays out. But you've got to remember, we're not in a hurry to settle your case, okay? We want to make sure first and foremost that you're taken care of physically, that you're better, because you only get one bite at the apple. And once we start that ball rolling as far as, approaching the insurance companies for settlements and that sort of stuff, you can't go back and unring that bell. And in the situation that Josh was talking about with the herniated disc, if you have to have surgery in 6 months or, a year down the road, we want to make sure, and nobody has a crystal ball, but we want to make sure the best we can that you're out of the woods from a treatment standpoint. And really, once that happens and we've got your medical records and we've got our hands wrapped around, what is this case kind of worth, then we can start putting the proper parties on notice, and we can, start moving forward with the settlement of the claim.
And another reason also, just quickly, to have a lawyer involved is you've got certain contractual responsibilities to your own insurance carrier, right? Whether you want to call it the uninsured motorist carrier or just the policy that you have to provide statements to them, you want to have a lawyer kind of lead, guide, and direct you through that process. So I think it's important to have a lawyer involved and to make sure that they are investigating all potential avenues for underinsured motorist coverage that could be applicable in your case based on your injuries. You don't just want to be compensated. You want to be fully compensated if you did something not at your fault. You want to make sure you're fully compensated. Good job, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Good stuff.
Always
good
happy
stuff.
to be here.
Always good to see you. And that about wraps it up for us for this edition of The Attorneys. Go ahead and put it on your calendar for next week. We'll be back with another topic, giving you good, useful information, and you can always reach Hollis Wright on all the social media platforms. Keep up with us throughout the week. We'll see you back here next time.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.